Good morning, good afternoon across the world to all our guests today. Welcome to the third day of the Gulf International Forum's fourth annual conference. It would be an understatement to say that the 12 months since our last annual conference have witnessed dramatic changes in the geopolitics of the region. The Gulf states have made great efforts to resort to diplomacy to resolve regional tensions. We've seen Saudi Arabia and Iran hold direct talks in Baghdad to de escalate their rivalry. The internal Gulf crisis, pitting Qatar against some of its neighbors, has been declared over and largely has receded from the headlines. Nevertheless, the region remains vulnerable to increasing tensions. Iran and the US have engaged to revive the JCPOA after President Donald Trump withdrew from the pact in 2018, but progress has escaped the negotiators. Washington's announced a desire to expand the agenda to include curbs on Iran's ballistic missile program and its support for allied militias within the region, followed by the election of a new president in Tehran, have put the negotiations on hold. Intense behind the scenes negotiations involving Europe and the US and various Iranian pronouncements give hope that they may start again this month, but we should not hold our breaths. Nevertheless, bellicose language from all sides raises the fear that something could go bad in the event no agreement is reached. On the other hand, the world economy's slow recovery and changed economic environment, especially doubts about the future of the oil and gas market from the COVID-19 pandemic and other factors, has created new challenges for all the Gulf states. Could this be leading some of them to a more sober approach in order to diminish regional security threats? Has the Gulf region moved past an era of military escalation? Will diplomacy prove game-changing, or will it founder once again? What shape would a Saudi-Iranian rapprochement take? What do the Gulf states make of the new American administration's actions and words in the region? How much has the new emphasis on diplomacy stemmed from uncertainty about American intentions? These are all a bunch of really difficult questions to answer. There may not be proper answers to them, but we have a panel today that is singularly well qualified to address these questions. Very quickly, you've seen their full biographies on our announcements, but very quickly, Sir Richard Dalton was a British diplomat professional from 1970 to 2006. I am fascinated by the list of jobs he held. He was the UK Consul General in Jerusalem, responsible for dealing with the Palestinian Authority after the signing of the Oslo Accords. He reestablished UK diplomatic relations with Libya, the first ambassador to Tripoli for 17 years. He was UK ambassador in Tehran 2002-2006, where he played a part in European negotiations with Iran when the UK was still in the EU. And this is a job I'm particularly jealous of because no American diplomat has had the opportunity to do the same. Since retirement, he has been working at Chatham House and co-wrote a research paper in September on Iran's nuclear future, which played a role in the formulation of the JCPOA. Our second speaker will be Dr. Mohammad Rumaihi, former advisor to Kuwait's Council of Ministers and professor at Kuwait University. Professor Rumaihi has written extensively on the political sociology and changes in the Gulf region and the cultural changing in the larger Arab world. He has published more than 25 books. He has served as the editor-in-chief of El Awan, a daily Kuwaiti newspaper, and Al Arabi magazine. He has served as general secretary of Kuwait's National Council for Culture, Arts, and Letters. If I went ahead to recite his entire curriculum vitae, serving the Kuwaiti government and many educational institutions in Kuwait and elsewhere in the Gulf, it would take up the entire time allotted for this panel. Dr. Sanam Vakil, who has been apparently has some technical problems signing on, but we expect to see her shortly, is the Deputy Director of the Middle East North Africa Program at Chatham House. She is leading work on Iran and Gulf Arab geopolitics and dynamics with a focus on regional security, Gulf geopolitics, and on future trends in Iran. She is also the James Anderson Professorial Lecturer at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in Bologna, after a stint as assistant professor at the Middle East at SAIS in Washington. She has done important research and analysis for the Council of Foreign Relations and the World Bank, and published a variety of media and academic works. Finally, and not least, Dr. Ebtisam al-Ketbi is president and founder of the Emirates Policy Center, perhaps one of the most important think tanks in the Arab world. She is distinguished as a professor of political science at the United Arab Emirates University, and in recognition of her role and great respect for her, Dr. al-Ketbi was appointed in 2015 as a member of the Consultative Commission of the Cooperation Council of the GCC. She was also chosen in 2018 as one of the 50 most influential women in the Arab world, and in 2019 received the Women's Superior Achiever Award during the World Women Leadership Conference. And anyway, you can read the rest. This is a remarkable group, and I would like to give the floor now to Sir Richard Dalton, Ambassador Dalton. Ambassador Dalton, I think your mic is muted.
Can you hear me now?
Perfectly.
Good. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Patrick. My title is 34 years after United Nations Security Council 598, what are the chances of multilateral security arrangements across the Persian Gulf? Resolution 598, as you will know, brought the Iran-Iraq war to a close, and paragraph 8 says, further requests the Secretary General of the UN to examine, in consultation with Iran and Iraq and with other states of the region, measures to enhance the security and stability of the region. This concept of collective examination of measures to enhance the security of the region has been explored in think tanks, but it has never been explored in detail by the states of the region. And so this paragraph of the resolution has never been put into effect. But my view is that if ever there was a dead clause in a United Nations Security Council resolution that needed reviving, this is it. That's because of the risk of further war, a risk exacerbated by the failure, collective failure, to use the ending of previous wars to take measures or set up structures to help prevent repetitions. There were opportunities after the Iran-Iraq war, after the 1990 invasion of Kuwait, and the 2003 invasion of Iraq, but none of those opportunities were taken. And of course, I think that the current tensions in the region are another opportunity. But before we think of the Gulf sub-region, I'd like to step back and look at the broad regional context. Rulers, unfortunately, have failed to develop accountable representatives.
Sir Richard, you've frozen on us.
Well, I may need to switch off the video. I don't know whether that's possible because I'm in a part of the UK where the signal isn't good, but I'm just going to plow on. If you can't hear me, tell me. So there are opposition movements and there's repression, and non-state armed groups thrive. Then there is the record of destabilizing failure in the exercise of United States power, failure and harm shared in by the US's Western partners, especially the UK. Arab regimes, I'm told, no longer see the US as a reliable guarantor of regime survival or of their interests. But of course, the blame goes much wider. Global and regional powers, many of them, have had and still do have conflicting interests, and they use violence, maritime provocations, drone attacks, assistance to extremists, assassinations and invasions that have devastating consequences. Nearly all states are doing what states have always done on other continents and in other periods, in the absence of restraining laws and agreements, namely intervening across their borders to influence what happens and to try to protect their perceived interests. The result? Most states of the region live with military threats and profound perceived insecurity. And massive arms transfers don't help much. But again, we should ask ourselves what underlies this regional disorder. I would suggest 4 things. Power is highly personalized. There are high levels of emotion and ideology, including fears of the other. And norms of interstate behavior are set aside. Governments claim they are acting lawfully, but in fact, we can see that they legitimize subjectively their self-interested actions. And finally, there is never going to be a common power that holds countries in awe and creates a regional order. Now, the post-World War II settlement entrenched the lesson that it is international law and institutions that stand between society and anarchy. And I think that the people of the Middle East have been denied what powers in other regions have set up, namely regional security bodies, for far too long and at immense human cost. So the Gulf region has no common sense security cooperation arrangement that would require transparency, consultation, confidence building, and communication in crises. Now, of course, in the absence of that common power, the states of the region have to create their own order. And the good news is that the first 3 of the 4 underlying factors I mentioned can, of course, be addressed. So if power is personalized, then some of it can be voluntarily surrendered to institutions which create mutual benefit. High levels of ideology and fears can be mitigated through agreement on what is acceptable and what is unacceptable policies, and hence mitigated. And if there are too few norms of interstate behavior, then they can be defined and acceptable behavior set out as what is a goal. It may not be achievable immediately, but consultations can get you there to a better level of observance. Now, many in the region, of course, acknowledge this, and you may find my lecturing you patronizing. But one can see as well that many in the region continually have emphasized the problems, the well-known problems, in changing the present situation. And they also assert preconditions for discussions of regional security arrangements, such as a prior end to certain Iranian actions. But my suggestion is that a step-by-step multilateral diplomatic process between neighbors will be and would be the best way around this. Inventing a grand pre-cooked scheme and asking everybody to sign up to it, that wouldn't work. But many people say, what of the lack of trust? Well, I suggest that it can be overcome, and it is not a prerequisite for a rational approach to problem solving. Saudis and Iranians are showing that now in their exchanges. In the Saudi case, spurred on by how Western involvement with Afghanistan ended. Saudi-Iranian talks, though, have been tried before, and they've fizzled out. I've heard both sides blame the other. Let's hope that this time the talks can be sustained and any agreements implemented. So what are the chances for regional security arrangements, for Resolution 598 finally being worked upon? Well, I suggest that they're not good yet, but they are actually better than they ever have been. And that's because, first, good ideas are out there. Russia's plan, Iran's Hormuz initiative, one could mention. Then the Syrian civil war and Arab support for the opposition there is winding down. The Saudis want to conclude their intervention in Yemen and find a way to ensure stability in Yemen through agreements. Iran, as you know, has been willing to start these discussions for many years. And I think the Arab side seems to have a greater sense of urgency and certainly has new confidence which is reflected in the more assertive and independent stance adopted towards their region since the Arab Spring by prominent younger leaders. So perhaps states of the region have realized that they cannot solve their very real security problems if they just stand firm on their current positions, assert their preconditions, and insist that others make changes. In short, if they do not engage across lines of enmity and sort out their region themselves.
So Richard, if we could, sorry, we're running out of time. We need to have,
yeah.
Right.
Okay, it would be easier, of course, for outsiders to suggest components for an extended dialogue, but that's not the point. The countries themselves should work out what to do. I'm sure the Secretary General of the UN would agree to play a convening and advisory role if the countries of the region asked him to. Now, I first published on this subject in 1992. I know I am out of touch. I look forward to the insights of scholars and practitioners who can put me straight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Richard. You answered at least 2 or 3 of the pre-written questions I had in mind in the course of your talk. Dr. Rumaihi.
Well, I don't know where to start in this very difficult subject. I think the ambassador have laid out a number of questions and answer of the problem we are facing. To my mind, the Iranian Revolution is one resemble other revolutions which want to get its influence around the neighbor, the country's neighboring her, and trying to do this within the Arab world by buying out, if you like, ideologically, some of the Shias under the title of al-mustad'afin, the poor people, to try to topple the regimes there. We in the Gulf have a number of Shia in Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Eastern Province, and some other Gulf smaller states. I'm not saying that all the Shia are adhering to the ideology of Iran, but there is a focus number of them. They are publicly saying or providing some money or some sort of support to the ideas of Iran, and they think that they are second-class citizen in their countries. This is what they think. This is happening in Iraq, and this is happening in Yemen, and this is happening in Lebanon. Of course, the case of Lebanon is very obvious. Hezbollah and the leader of Hezbollah is saying publicly that our money, our arms, our everything is coming from Iran, and we adhere to the Khamenei. In Yemen, there's a small number, quite probably good numbers, called Al-Houthi, who are, they think that they are Hashemite, descended from the old regime in Yemen, and they want to bring Yemen as well under their authority, supported by arms and money from Iran and some sort of military advisor there. In Iraq, they have a number of groups, of course, adhering to the Khamenei ideology, to Wilayat al-Faqih ideology. So what we have here is Iran interfering directly into the internal politics of those countries, which is definitely they refuse that. The second point, I do think that for the last 40 years, the Iranian authority has fluctuated, if you like. I remember that under Rafsanjani, there was some sort of understanding between Gulf and Iran, and later on under Khatami as well. I was there at that time, traveling and seeing some people, and it looks that they understand the situation, and to some extent they believe that they should not intervene within the internal situation in those Gulf states. However, because of this fluctuation, now we are seeing a more fundamentalist sort of government in Iran. For the 40 years or so with this revolution, we have seen how the economy has deteriorated in Iran, how the human rights was deteriorating, the general life of the Iranian, in fact, is much worse than the worst time of the Shah of Iran. So you have this kind of unease inside Iran, and you have thousand upon thousand of opposition, different kind of opposition, Iranian opposition abroad and within Iran itself. So the more the government in Iran feel insecure, the more they can sell the idea that we are now occupying more or less for Arab capitals, Sana'a, Beirut, Damascus, and Baghdad. So under this kind of situation, and because what the ambassador has mentioned, the problem of ideology, the Houthi, for instance, think that Mahdi al-Muntadhar, this gentleman who some of the Shia believe that he will come at the end of the time, has to come after the collapse of Mecca. So what is their goal is to occupy Mecca and destroy it. This is unimaginable, of course, and to me is out of rational thinking, but this is what they are saying. Now in Yemen, the schools, the Shia school, if you like, is spreading, supported by the Iranian to spread the Shiism within the Yemen. The Yemenis are poor, and of course they would like to be supported financially here and there. My problem, which I have probably written about it many times, that the idea of Iranian revolution is taking us to 1,300 years ago. It's, I mean, this is what I believe, that in the region here we have two political projects, if my understanding is correct. One is trying to get within the modernization. We have seen some sort of that in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and other Gulf states. And the other project is to take the society back 1,300 years. I am against the religious and politics. I mean, religion and politics doesn't mix to my mind. And it's not just religious people of Shiism, even Sunnism. I am against them, because I believe we should live in a modern age with minimum.
Dr. Rumaihi, if I could just ask in a few seconds, we need to keep up with our schedule, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you there.
I said, yes, I'm trying, as moderator, I'm trying to keep the time for everyone. So
the time.
I
want to conclude. I want to conclude that even this kind of discussion between Saudi Arabia and Iran today, I don't think there is a way out of it. I do believe the government of the Gulf is a peace-seeking government. They don't want any problems or any wars. But unfortunately, it takes two to tango, as they say. And the Iranian, probably they are pushing for an ideology which is not accepted by most of us. And because of the Iranian vis-a-vis the American and the West, they think that if pressurize the Gulf state, probably they can get some sort of compromise with the West. I'm pessimistic, if you like, in this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought I had seen Dr. Sanam. Oh, there you are. I got scared there for a second. I'm very glad to see you. And I hope you were able to follow at least part of the discussion until now. So I'm opening the floor to you and to your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and apologies for the delay. I had a time change fail because we've moved our clocks forward in London, and my calendar didn't adjust. So apologies. It happens twice a year, I think, to some of us. And my internet just crashed, so hopefully it's not going to crash again.
Hopefully we're going to bring the time changes in Europe and the United States onto the same date again. Hello? I think there we are.
Okay, I'm very sorry. I'm going to keep this brief in the hope that the line remains stable. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. And apologies for missing the first part of the conversation. I think this is a fascinating issue to be covering, and I wanted to reflect for a minute about how regional dynamics and events in the Gulf have led to the rounds of dialogue that we are witnessing between Saudi Arabia and Iran, but also a broader pattern of dialogue that we're witnessing around the region. I see the roots of this dialogue
Let's see if we can. This is, here we are. No. Okay, we're going, while we try and sort out Dr. Vakil's internet problems, I would like to turn the opportunity over to, oh, here she is back again. Hello?
Hi, I'm very apologetic. I'm so sorry. Would you like me to continue, or would you like to pass
please
on?
continue. Perhaps if you kill the camera, there might be enough bandwidth left to keep this operating.
Well, I've signed on from my phone, so I think things should be okay now.
Okay, so much better.
Yes. So I see the roots of this current pattern of dialogue as tied to a few of shifts that we've witnessed in the region. Of course, the emergence of a new administration in Washington is a huge driver, and one that I'll speak to momentarily. I think that COVID and the economic impact of COVID has also given many of the countries around the region pause and provided a cooling down period where countries have also perhaps reflected that prioritizing domestic issues and economic ones is in the interest of each country, but also the region more broadly. And finally, I see this sort of inflection point coming after this period of tension that we witnessed under the Trump administration, particularly from 2018 to 2020, when the Trump administration withdrew from the Iran nuclear agreement in May of 2018, and Iran in May of 2019 began to implement its maximum resistance strategy. And that strategy was directed to transferring pain and risk and instability to regional states, and particularly those states that had been supportive of President Trump's maximum pressure campaign. And in this case, both the UAE and Saudi Arabia were made vulnerable by attacks sponsored by Iran in the Persian Gulf, attacks on tankers and shipping, as well as, I think, the biggest turning point, particularly for Saudi Arabia, was September 14th, 2019, when its oil facilities in Abqaiq were attacked by drones and missiles in a very carefully calculated, calibrated attack. That attack brought to light that the Trump administration was not, despite the close relationship between Washington and Riyadh during that period, going to actively defend the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in the way that it was expected. And I think it heightened the kingdom's sense of vulnerability in a serious way. And since then, there has been a gradual resetting of the kingdom's priorities, which are directed towards drawing down and trying to arrive at a peace settlement in Yemen. Of course, this is still elusive, but I think this is on the top of the agenda. As part of that strategy of prioritizing domestic issues and economic stability, the kingdom sees outreach with Iran and a cooling down of tensions as hugely important. And in fact, we have seen the Crown Prince Mohammad bin Salman over the past few months signal that he is supportive of regional engagement, shifting from a very harsh anti-Iranian rhetoric where he referred to Iran's supreme leader as akin to Hitler to now very clearly signaling a moderation and a welcoming of the possibilities of dialogue. I think the arrival of the new administration in Tehran has also been helpful and beneficial. The Raisi administration is a conservative one, and and Iran's president is seen to be very close to the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, a reflection, if you will, of Khamenei's own worldview and ideology. And by having a president close to the supreme leader in the executive branch, I think there's also been thinking in Riyadh, but more broadly around the Gulf, that the president perhaps has the blessing and the ability to represent the supreme leader's interests in a more meaningful way. Raisi has called for regional dialogue, and I think in order to demonstrate that he has unique executive capabilities compared to his predecessor, Hassan Rouhani, who saw his presidency weakened by the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA, the economic impact of that withdrawal, alongside his inability to broaden outreach and build back ties, particularly with the Gulf Arab states. Raisi is looking to turn a page and demonstrate that he is better than a Rouhani. And so he's looking to try and deliver on regional dialogue. So I think in this context, we have seen the 4 very direct rounds of dialogue between Tehran and Riyadh. And this is also an opportunity, I think, for the kingdom to signal to Washington, as well as European countries, that it is looking to be supportive of the P5+1's dialogue with Iran on the nuclear program, but at the same time also signal very clearly that Saudi Arabia is willing to craft its own independent outreach and policy to Iran, and is not going to hinge necessarily that policy to that of Washington's or those of the E3. So that is, I think, also an important turning point. Tensions between Washington and Riyadh with the Biden administration, I think, are also worthwhile mentioning. The Biden administration has definitely tried to reset relationships that were seen to be quite difficult under the Trump administration. This is an administration that is trying to balance values alongside its interests. And as part of that, the Biden administration has prioritized ending the Yemen war and particularly tried to shift its support for that process by only providing defensive military equipment to Saudi Arabia rather than offensive equipment. At the same time, the Biden administration has been significantly investing in diplomacy, sending their Yemen envoy, Tim Lenderking, over 8 times, I believe, to the Gulf as well. So there has been an investment there as well. Ultimately, though, I think what is being reflected around the region and perhaps more acutely in the kingdom is that it is clear that through the course of 3 U.S. administrations, from President Obama to President Trump, and ultimately where we are today with President Biden, is that the U.S. Is prioritizing its domestic interests alongside its geopolitical challenges with China. From their perspective, of course, this is coming at a cost to the security relationship, and that's how it's being perceived in Riyadh, with deep anxiety sort of trickling through the institutions and among the political elite. I believe that Prince Turki Al Faisal has also just very publicly recently stated that and reflected those anxieties by calling on the Biden administration to, quote, weigh carefully any steps he takes to impact the historical bond between Washington and Riyadh as well.
Dr. Vakil, could
yes.
I just say that we have just a few more seconds on this? I'm trying to keep it's a difficult task, but I always try to keep everybody in line a bit.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
I will wrap up very quickly. So I think these dynamics are also driving the dialogue that we have seen underway. It's unclear when the dialogue will pick up. And I'm happy to talk perhaps a bit further in the conversation about the progress of that dialogue, which has been pitched and sold from Tehran and Riyadh in very different ways. I think for now we should be comforted that the dialogue has continued. Engagement is definitely cooling tensions in the region, but ultimately for that dialogue to evolve in a meaningful way, it does require concessions from both sides. And of course, I think will be hugely dependent on the Vienna process and when that resumes. So I'll stop here, and I look forward to the conversation moving forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Ebtisam.
Thank you, Patrick. Maybe I will take a different approach, which we call in the political science, that you don't pay attention for the noises rather than looking to the big picture. Now, Iran's pursuit of regional hegemony presents an increasingly complex and intractable dilemma for the Middle East. So Iran neither succeeded in its aims nor abandoned this destructive strategy. This dilemma has threatened the region's security and stability for 4 decades, creating an impasse that extends beyond the Middle East to affect global interests. Now, the coming few years are going to be crucial if the international community doesn't resolve the dilemma. The Iranian crisis will become even more bleak. Now, several attempts have been made to solve the impasse, from the JCPOA, in which world power acquiesced to separate the nuclear issue from Iran's regional interference, to the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign to tame the regime in Tehran. However, all these efforts have failed. The nuclear deal's failure reflects Iran's neglect of the strategic determinants that govern its perception of itself and the world around it as a country with imperialistic and doctrinal motivations. Iran was also over optimistic in the estimation of its desire to reach cooperative regional solutions. So meanwhile, by reducing Iran's policy motivation to simple economics, the maximum pressure campaign employed for past 3 years failed to accomplish its key objectives. The Iranian regime has not moved from its position on numerous contentious issues. Despite the economic pressure the country has been under. Now, regional approaches to solving the Iranian impasse have also not considered the duplicity of the regime in Tehran, nor the nature relations between the government and the deep states, rendering them hollow and superficial. So Iran's broad perspective focuses on holding fragmented negotiations that touch on contentious issues by looking at each separately. Though this strategy, Tehran avoid getting into comprehensive talks and prefers isolated negotiations on distinct issues with several parties. For instance, Iran likely to exclude its missile program from these talks because it considers it a strategic program to balance regional powers. At the same time, Tehran will focus on its regional expansion, which has lost a lot of its momentum, suggesting a concluding that it is hard to hold on to such efforts. Iran has always wanted to apply the strategy of interim solutions through gradual steps, as it gives Tehran the ability to buy time and separate partners in the dialogue. So one can argue that Iran has lost a great deal of its regional influence. Moreover, the country's armament program have declined due to its severe economic crisis. This drives the Iranian sides, aware of this declining influence, to think about using these cars before they become useless, and talk with regional and international parties. If this is the conviction among some think tanks in Iran, continuing and enhancing it among Iranian decision makers will remain subject to the policies of the new American administration. There is no doubt that outside Iran, the Arab Gulf countries suffer most from the ongoing stalemate. Iran's closest neighbors are seen as threats for its expansionist project, where it can create leverage to pressure the international community, especially Washington. Hence, the Arab Gulf countries watch the attempt to settle the Iranian issue with great concern. The reason behind this concern are Arab Gulf countries fear that may be doomed to a repeat of the nuclear deal experience, as international stakeholders continue to ignore their interest, while in effect permitting Tehran to marginalize them. Second, these countries also fear that Washington's abundance of dialogue in favor of outsourcing solution to regional partners may undermine essential engagement with Iran by restricting any cooperation to bilateral basis, or at best purely regional negotiations without international supervision or auspices. We have seen that the international negotiation with Iran, such as with the GCPOA, have failed in achieving their stated goals. Meanwhile, bilateral negotiations between Iran and individual states lack any guarantee that the parties will abide by its outcomes, and only serve to reduce tension without addressing and solving issues, mainly the Iranian-Saudi negotiation. Now, with this concern in mind, the international community and the GCC countries must devise innovative initiative to resolve the impasse before it reaches the point of no return. If a comprehensive resolution of outstanding issues is still impossible, considering the trust deficit between Iran and Washington, Tehran's categorical rejection of regional discussion and refusal to involve the Arab countries in any negotiations, then the same attitude may be open the door instead to regional negotiations on matters that concern the international community and the Arab region alike. Iran's ballistic missiles program and its regional expansionist agenda can be viewed as part of these scenarios. However, such an initiative should be also consider the strategic detriments that have prevented stakeholders from reaching a practical resolution of the issue thus far. So such regional initiative should be enable major world powers and bodies, including US, UN Security Council, to oversee negotiation. Their involvement could ensure the implementation of outcome and encourage
Dr.
adherence.
Ebtisam, if I could just ask you to conclude in a few moments. Thank you.
I think
Sorry
I'm
about-
taking less than my counterparts.
You did take less. Unfortunately, we're running.
Okay, I will conclude, but if you give me one,
Sure,
2
sure,
minutes,
sure, please.
okay. This is now I'm talking about if we also their involvement could ensure the implementation of outcomes and encourage adherence to the resulting agreement by adopting supportive UN resolution, including the of flexible legal instruments similar to snapback sanctions. So such an arrangement could also address areas of weakness in any regional initiative sought by Tehran. So considering now the multiple and complex dispute between the GCC countries, which Ambassador Dalton mentioned, and Iran, and the high degree of mistrust between the two sides, it will be helpful to start a dialogue with Iran, first on non-political dispute, away from major outstanding issues. Such a dialogue can enhance cooperation in less politically and security sensitive areas, such as combating the spread of pandemics and countering organized crime and smuggling. Other areas of collaboration can include climate change, environment, water, agriculture, livestock, regional trade, transport, oil, gas, and power. Moreover, the focus must be placed on cultural and social denominators, the interaction between political elites, think tanks, and mainly other non-controversial issues. This might be the start to build the confidence between the two parties, and I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, my apologies. Yeah, these are all fascinating. This is one very big, fascinating subject, but not only that of academic fascination, but we're really talking about the livelihoods of countries and of peoples in the region, which is very important. One subject that all of you alluded to, and which is rather important to me in particular, has been the perception of American policy in the region. Yesterday, we had a very interesting intervention by Dr. Ayad Alawi, former Prime Minister of Iraq, and perhaps the most pro-American nationalist politician in Iraq, who expressed great disappointment at American policy of the previous administration, of several previous administrations, and of the current administration as well. And he painted a rather gloomy picture of where things were going, primarily in his view, because American policy was either wrong-headed or simply opaque. So if I could ask all of the panelists, perhaps starting in reverse order with Dr. Ebtisam, what is the Gulf countries' perception of American policy? What do they think the Americans are up to and the Americans are doing, and how are they reacting? Dr. Ebtisam.
Well, based on the recent developments, the American withdrawing from Afghanistan, definitely the Gulfists view the American that they are incredible. So you cannot count on them. Okay, they can leave, and also they are withdrawing from the region. So how can the Gulfists count on the American? They are failing them. That's why these countries are returning to solve their problem, or let's say regional problems, by themselves. I don't think the American can be guarantor, or they want to play this role again for the security in the region. Still, the American also lack the vision, what do they want from the region? As I said, many initiatives has failed, either with the negotiation or with the pressure, failed to resolve the Iranian impasse, failed to bring the security to the region. I would say let the region solve its problem by itself. If the American want to solve it, let's be the guarantor to, if this negotiation will lead to something, not only will lead to Iran hegemon in the region.
Thank you, Dr. Vakil.
Thank you. To echo Dr. Ebtisam, I would concur wholly that there is a deep sense that the United States, particularly after the departure and the sort of symbolism of that departure, chaotic and embarrassing departure from Afghanistan, is no longer reliable. And this sort of echoes many of the same sentiments that Gulf states felt during the Obama administration. Those sentiments are back. They're strong. I felt them on recent trips to the Gulf. And it feels that no matter what the U.S. tries to do or how it tries to engage, for the time being, this ship has sailed. And what we're effectively witnessing is some hedging with broader outreach to Russia, for example, from Saudi Arabia. Of course, economic ties are already quite strong with China, but looking for alternative partners, not necessarily to replace the United States, but to balance against these anxieties. There are, of course, we have seen greater regional initiatives like the Abraham Accords, for example, that I think are also partially driven by mutual concerns on regional issues, but also mutual anxiety about the role of the United States in the region that could afford regional states an opportunity to manage regional tensions independently. I do think that greater regional activism and regional responsibility is indeed what is needed for Middle Eastern states. But ultimately, for that to be achieved, regional states should be aware that a collective security framework, or that model that is exclusive rather than inclusive, if that collective model continues to be repeated, the patterns of instability and insecurity will continue. And instead, perhaps I would recommend, and we've recommended in our work here at Chatham House, for regional states through confidence building measures, as suggested by Dr. Ebtisam, for example, to start considering how to build confidence and eventually build up to a cooperative model of security that doesn't require states to completely align on issues, but agree on principles. And that is ultimately what is needed in the region to manage these plethora of crises that we have been witnessing for a number of years, to ease tensions, and also to ultimately allow the United States to prioritize domestic issues, which I think many states in the region don't really understand how grave they are. And that's a bit missing in the conversation, a bit of awareness of the domestic drivers of American foreign policy as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rumaihi, both of the both the two speakers said that they had lost confidence and credibility. You believe the Gulf states have lost confidence and credibility in American policy. Not only do you agree with that, but do you think that the Gulf states even understand what American policy is?
I think both sides, the Gulf states probably couldn't understand the American politics as it is. And from the other side, there is a vague point of view to the area as a whole. And this has happened for a couple of decades and for different reasons. I do think that the Americans recently, for the last 10, 15 years, have been very occupied with the local politics and, this kind of unbalanced political situation within the United States. I am, as an observer, I was shocked that the American people will elect the president of the United States, called Mr. Trump. Because what's appeared to me that it looks that he has no understanding of general politics at all. Mr. Barack Obama has, for one reason or another, has presented the Middle East to the Muslim brothers without knowing their probably, if you like, their social agenda, and human rights agenda again. Probably they were frustrated of the old regimes, and the area is not moving ahead where they would like to go. So this is of course, Afghanistan is very important, as Dr. Ebtisam was saying. And I was reading recently a book by Prince Turki Faisal on the Afghan file. I would like everybody interested in the Middle East to read this book, because the disengagement of the American in Afghanistan earlier even than 2021, before 2001, the disengagement, very quick disengagement, has astonished everybody after they pour billions of dollars themselves, the Saudis and the Pakistanis. So, to my mind, even the decision making in the United States is not coordinating between themselves. There is a point of view of foreign affairs ministry, and there is another point of view of the military, and probably White House have third point of view. So this kind of, if you like, messages confuse everybody, especially their allies in the Gulf. That's why, generally speaking, there is a suspicious stand of what American can do and what they can do. Take one issue like human rights. What is the better human rights situation? Is it in the Gulf or in Iran? What is the worst? Very, very worst. And if you look to the administration, even this one, they are talking about the nuclear deal without having any probably broad point of view of human rights in Iran. So this is something puzzled me. Just to finalize this point, I was in one of the panel prior to the Iraqi invasion, and it was brought up by one American think tank. The meeting was in London, and they were discussing the Iraqi invasion and what have you. This is a few months before the invasion itself, and I raised the idea of what about the next day? That nobody wants to talk about next day. They want to talk about what we are going to do and how we are going to do it. So this is unfortunate. So to conclude, there's a very lack of understanding from the American, generally speaking, to the area, and I do think vis-a-vis from our area to the American. We think that the American president is like our king. He can say what he wants, and that's all. And this is not the case in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Richard, this conversation so far has led me to remember a statement once attributed to Winston Churchill, which is, you can count on the Americans to do the right thing after they try everything else first. Do you think we will ever pull that one off? Do we think we can make Winston Churchill a liar or a prophet?
Well, I don't want to add much on this subject, but simply to say that I have become very cynical about the possibility of the US and to a lesser extent the UK acting in any way to make the region of the Middle East a better place in which to live.
Thank you. That really, you and Dr. Alawi agree almost completely. We are sort of running out of time, so what I would like to do in the order in which we began, beginning with Sir Richard, your wrap-up remarks and answering the question in those wrap-up remarks, what is the likelihood that the Gulf can find a way to restore security through its own diplomacy, or is it doomed to just keep repeating history? Sir Richard.
As I said, the chances at present are not good, but they are better than they have ever been before in my experience. New leadership means new ideas, and the failure of past approaches tends to breed anywhere in the world a desire to think of new ones. So I am cautiously optimistic. I think that the diplomatic channels have been grossly underused between Iran and its neighbors, including, of course, Iraq. But I think there is now an opportunity, provided that outside countries don't make the situation worse, for Iraq, Iran, and the 6 states of the GCC to find a modus vivendi. Thank you.
Dr. Rumaihi, your take on the likelihood that we can actually make this a better place in the Gulf?
We have tried to have some sort of backdoor diplomacy, if you like, by academicians and people interested from the Gulf and the Iranian. And the Iranian were very reluctant. And whoever come to the discussion, he will tell you off record something, and on record he will be afraid of speaking his mind. I mean, I came to a conclusion, even on television, international television or Arab television, who is speaking from Tehran, don't listen to him too much, because he has a rhetoric, if you like, and he couldn't go out of the general line. Otherwise, he will be punished. So the freedom of speech, if you like, in Iran is very, very limited. That's why I don't think there will be any layout so far, even within the diplomat circle, whatever we look to Iran, we will see a number of governments, if you like. There is a deep government there, led by the National Guard, and there is the official government, at least during Rouhani period. So I am cautiously pessimistic, if you like.
Dr. Vakil, that actually, Dr. Rumaihi sounded more than cautiously pessimistic, but can we count on you for a more upbeat assessment?
I would love to be optimistic, but I would say that I'm on the fence on this, and probably I'm trying to check against my pessimistic instinct about the region and the ability for regional states to transcend. And my pessimism is perhaps driven not just about the history and dynamics and sort of the patterns of lack of engagement in the region, but also really because while we are in this moment driven by perhaps mutual instability, mutual recalibration, anxiety on all sides, about the direction versus the future. I think that there are concerning trends, not just within Iran or within the Gulf Arab states that we should be mindful of, or not just between Iran and the GCC states, but also among the GCC states that still need engagement and support in order to foster a better regional environment. So I think we really need to see a sustained conversation, diplomacy, and engagement on all sides. Right now, we are still in this hedging, or let's say a calibration moment that, based on outcomes of U.S. elections or based on events in the region, could very easily fall to the wayside. And I think that, is what drives my pessimism. But we'll see. I think the months and weeks ahead could very much shift things one way or another. And by every means, I'm quite concerned that GCC states will see outcomes in Vienna as an excuse or another reason to return to patterns of containment rather than pursuing this sort of nascent engagement that we have been seeing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ketbi. The last word belongs to you on this one. And if I could add just one thought, and perhaps you could add a sentence or two at the end. There seems to be a general reflection. You felt that general pessimism. You believe it essential that the Gulf states find their own way forward. And the last, and if you could just add a thought on the idea that the Gulf still remains vitally important to the economies of the world. Does this lead? What is the likelihood that things going bad in the Gulf might drag foreign powers back in?
Sanam mentioned the GCC. GCC also was part of the problem with Iran, that GCC countries do not share the same view on Iran question, as they do not have the same threat perception, nor do they agree on how to deal with it. Therefore, there is a need for intra-GCC dialogue that should precede any potential dialogue with Iran. This will help develop common perception and agreed on approach to address regional issues that threaten Gulf security in general and Iran's question in particular. Now, here I will mention here the Abraham Accord as well, as a driver for economic prosperity. If all parties here, mainly Israel and the other countries who normalize with Israel, to create an arc of prosperity, economic prosperity, can attract the others and show that everybody can be a winner in this. If we did not abandon the zero-sum game in the region, we will stuck all, and there will be no solution if we did not move to win-win situation, both including the Iranian, including the Israeli, including the GCC and the Arab world. And here will persuade the Iranian elite to abandon their dangerous policy in the region, and they can be also winner with this new realities in the Middle East.
Thank you so much. This has been a fascinating, if somewhat disturbing discussion, disturbing for the future. I hope very much that we'll see an era of cooperation in the future, in the near future in the Gulf region. I would like to thank all of you, all of the participants. Too bad we can't hear applaud as we could when we were together once. And to remind everyone that the fourth and final session of the Gulf International Forum's conference will be tomorrow at the same time, discussing a very important issue that affects equally all countries in the region, which is how do the Gulf countries deal with the fact that a very large percentage of their population is really quite young and disaffected. Thank you all for watching. We are available on YouTube for your friends to review this, and see you tomorrow. Thank you.